Hey guys, tonight we're diving into something so wildly unexpected it might just make you question everything you thought you knew about medieval life. Not knights and castles, not dragons. Nope. Tonight we're talking horoscopes. But not just any horoscopes. We're diving headfirst into a medieval mindset, where fertility calendars, cosmic alignments, and warnings about Mars in retrograde dictated whether Thursday was a good day to conceive or if you risked birthing a demon baby. This isn't the cozy bedtime story you might have expected, but trust me, you'll want to hear how deeply old-school astrologers meddled in love lives, conception schedules, and baby-making rituals. If you're a logic enthusiast, brace yourself, you might not survive this. Picture 14th century England, streets reeking of regret and turnip soup, gray skies, and plagues as casual backdrop. You and your partner want a baby, but this isn't just about love or biology, it's cosmic warfare. Before any intimacy, you consult an astrologer or a midwife moonlighting as a stargazer. Why? Because people genuinely believed the success of conception and the quality of the child hinged on the precise alignment of planets and stars. Venus out of whack. Bad time. Mars in your 7th house. Too much aggression. Saturn in your partner's 5th? Maybe try again next lifetime. These weren't fluffy horoscopes in a magazine. They were detailed astronomical breakdowns with tables, moon cycles, and lists of herbs to gather under starlight for better outcomes. Spoiler, most didn't work. But they tried. Oh, how they tried. This wasn't just mysticism. It was medical practice. University-trained doctors in robes, muttering Latin, had textbooks mapping a woman's fertility to the zodiac. Aries? Hot and dry, good for a bold child. Pisces? Too watery, prone to melancholy. The womb was a cosmic calendar, ruled by celestial permission slips. Men weren't exempt either. They had astrological fertility profiles, with doctrines claiming a man's birth sign, transits, and mood could doom a child to weakness or curses. Mars in your chart might mean a warrior child, strong but aggressive. Mercury? Clever but possibly deceitful. Saturn? Cold, melancholic, destined to scribble poetry in an attic. A void moon during conception? Pack it up. The kid might not happen or would be perpetually confused. This wasn't peasant superstition. Monarchs planned royal births with astrological charts, conceiving heirs during precise windows when Venus, Jupiter, and the moon gave the green light. No romantic spontaneity here. If it was Lent or someone had the flu, tough luck. The stars didn't reschedule. Couples paid astrologers for electional charts to pinpoint the perfect conception moment, like a wedding planner crossed with a star whisperer. Your astrologer might declare Thursday at twilight as your golden hour, paired with planetary herbs and prayers. One noblewoman reportedly refused intimacy because Mercury was misaligned, fearing a dishonest child. Her husband, unable to argue with the stars, waited. Today, we know this is mostly nonsense, but back then, astrology filled gaps in a world ignorant of ovulation or genetics. It offered patterns, order, and comfort that the universe had a plan, even if that plan warned against conceiving during an eclipse to avoid a child with goat hooves. The oldest surviving English medical text from the 12th century links astrology to conception, with a zodiac while detailing which signs to avoid to prevent defects of the limbs. An obscure German manuscript even claimed children conceived during Mercury's hours might become thieves or, gasp, tax collectors. Historians debate how seriously this was taken. Some argue it was mostly for the educated elite. Others say it permeated everyday life, especially among midwives. Either way, horoscopes were life plans, not entertainment. Imagine a candlelit room, smelling of beeswax and herbs, where a midwife consults a brass astrolabe while glancing at the moon. She's not praying to God. She's calculating the moon's zodiac sign to determine if the child will thrive. Every reproductive stage, from menstruation to birth, was mapped to the heavens like a divine biology textbook. Each zodiac sign had medical properties. Aries, hot and dry, was good for conception but risky for warm bodies. Cancer, cold and moist, boosted fertility but risked emotional babies. Scorpio, ruled by Mars and tied to secrecy, was feared. Conceiving under it could produce powerful but violent or deformed children. A 13th century text advised avoiding Scorpio for a calm, healthy child. Menstrual cycles, called the red tide or time of the moon, were tracked with star charts. Waning moons were bad, waxing moons, hopeful, full moons, unpredictable. Conceiving during an eclipse? Better keep a black goat handy for a sacrificial backup. Time of day mattered too. Nighttime under Leo might yield a bold, restless child. Daytime under Virgo, a practical one. These beliefs were passed through herbals, prayers, and whispered advice. Men tracked their wives' cycles on astrological calendars, sometimes abstaining during certain moon phases to avoid a wicked child. Lunariums, medieval almanacs, tracked lunar phases for everything from farming to sex, used by monasteries, midwives, and royals alike. In a bizarre 15th century French treatise, a physician claimed Gemini-born women could bear twins if they conceived under a new moon with Jupiter in the first house. Interpretations varied. Sagittarius might produce long-legged optimists or reckless troublemakers. Capricorn, melancholic poets or future clergy. The Church officially condemned astrology for undermining free will, but quietly practiced it, especially for medical purposes. In a world of high maternal and infant mortality, any promise of control was irresistible. Now, let's talk Venus and Mars, the ultimate celestial third wheels in medieval romance. Venus governed beauty, femininity, and fertility. Mars, passion, aggression, and virility. When aligned, they promised fertile, affectionate unions. When clashing, they brought impotence or wrathful children. Astrological manuals mapped Venus and Mars across the zodiac, dictating when to act or abstain. Mars in Leo with Venus in Taurus, passionate and fertile. Mars in Cancer with Venus in Aquarius, sorrow of the loins. Fridays, Venus's day, were primed for conception, believed to produce beautiful, loving children. Mars didn't care about ambience, favoring raw settings like barns, potentially birthing rude children. A 13th century astrologer to King Alfonso X of Castile wrote that Venus and Mars in Libra produced noble children, while in Aries, they yielded strong but crude ones. Marriages could falter if partners' charts clashed. Say, Venus in reserved Capricorn versus Mars in flirty Sagittarius. Some believed Venus and Mars conjunctions flooded Earth with erotic energy, sparking candlelit trysts disguised as herb picking. Yet, excessive planetary influence was warned against, lest children become adulterers, actors, or poets, equally scandalous. And then there's medieval sperm astrology. Sperm was seen as a man's refined essence, its quality waxing and waning with the stars. A strong Mars or Jupiter meant vigorous seed, Saturn, cold and lifeless. The hour of conception mattered too. Jupiter's hour promised philosophical children, Saturn's heavy-eyed melancholics. Eclipses were a hard no, with text warning of blind, mute, or joyless children. Some even claimed zodiac signs influenced sperm's directionality. Aries for forceful emissions, Pisces for delicate drifting. Infertility? Your physician would check your star chart, not your diet, prescribing saffron wine during Venus's hour. Gender prediction was another layer. Mars-flavored sperm for boys, Venus for girls. Masculine signs like Aries tilted towards sons, feminine signs like Taurus, daughters. Some texts even suggested stars psychically shaped sperm before conception, a prenatal horoscope. Historians debate whether this was symbolic or literal, but medical texts and university curricula suggest it was taken seriously. The stars didn't just predict, they shaped life. Scorpio, though, was the ultimate deal-breaker. Ruled by Mars and watery intensity, it was feared for producing moody, lustful, or demon-influenced children. Midwives carried Scorpio warnings, and nobles delayed consummations to avoid its influence. Other signs had issues. Virgo too cold, Aquarius too unstable. But Scorpio's fixed nature made its traits permanent, like a cosmic tattoo. Some believed its alignments opened spiritual portals, inviting dark forces. So, picture yourself in a 14th century cottage, wine warming, fire crackling. The mood is perfect until someone checks the lunar calendar and sees the moon in Scorpio. No matter the passion, you don't mess with the scorpion. It's not superstition, it's survival. The stars weren't just watching. They were calling the shots, uninvited guests in every medieval bedroom. When a moon passed through Scorpio, medieval astrologers believed it created thin places, moments where malevolent entities could influence the material world, including conception. Some texts warned that demons were particularly active during Scorpio moons, attempting to infiltrate the womb through the seed to produce spiritually burdened children, born angry, anxious, or prone to sin. These weren't always full-blown demon babies, but they carried a dark pull, as one Flemish midwife described. To counter this, couples used protective talismans during intercourse if Scorpio was unavoidable. Silver inscribed with angelic names, rosemary sprigs tucked under mattresses, or carnelian gemstones to repel infernal influence. Long prayers to archangels were recited to guard the womb. In rural areas, people tossed salt in bedroom corners and hoped for the best. Records suggest some believed these practices worked. Children born under clean, astrological alignments were often healthy, reinforcing the star's authority. A moody Scorpio-born child was proof you ignored the sky's warnings. Class divides shaped access. Nobles consulted trained astrologers, while peasants relied on vague herbalist advice like avoid the black moon. A limping or temperamental child was blamed on unheeded stars, especially for those who couldn't afford precise charts. Astrology was part science, part religion, and deeply tied to social hierarchy. A 13th century manuscript blamed Scorpio for infants born with teeth, a bad omen linked to witches or sorcerers. Noble families sometimes hid such births, claiming fairies swapped the child rather than admitting a Scorpio moon conception. An apocryphal Spanish tale tells of a Scorpio-born child with a serpent's gaze, able to paralyze chickens by staring. He became a traveling performer, turning prophecy into show business. Historians debate whether the Scorpio taboo was literal or a way to explain misfortune after the fact. Some see it as superstition dressed in scholarly robes. Others argue astrologers genuinely believed they were protecting future generations from spiritual harm. Likely, it was both a convenient scapegoat for birth defects or mental illness, like saying, well, Mars was in Scorpio. The moon, especially when full, was a celestial powerhouse in medieval Europe. People stared at it nervously, clutching charms or muttering prayers, convinced it governed fertility, moods, and bodily fluids. The 28-day lunar cycle mirrored the female reproductive cycle, seen not as coincidence but cosmic design. A cycle starting at a new moon was auspicious, signaling strong fertility, especially if conception occurred during the waxing phase, symbolizing vitality. Full moons brought intense energy, promising passionate children but risking unpredictability, geniuses or madmen. Waning moons were avoided, linked to weak, melancholic, or sickly children. The moon's zodiac position mattered too. Cancer or Taurus boosted fertility. Virgo, Aquarius, or Leo were barren. Noble families planned conception months in advance, prioritizing timing over love. Childbirth was deadly, and miscarriages were common, so lunar calendars offered a sense of control. Medical texts called the womb a little moon, reacting to lunar phases like tides to gravity. Some claimed the womb tilted during full moons or opened during waxing phases. A 14th century manuscript even illustrated the womb as a moon-shaped vessel with stars inside. In rural areas, pregnant women covered their bellies during full moons to avoid spiritual disturbances, as moonlight was thought to penetrate the fetus. Eclipses were worse. Women hid indoors, avoiding mirrors or water, and hung mugwort or vervain in windows to repel lunar rays. Some pinned bone or antler amulets to their gowns to trick the moon. Scholars debate whether these beliefs were elite doctrine or folk tradition. Educated astrologers dismissed some claims as peasant superstition, but still consulted lunar calendars for noble conceptions. Midwives watched phases closely. Full moons signaled early labor. Waning moons risked slow births and quiet newborns. One midwife's journal noted babies born during waning moons took longer to cry and live. In the birthing room, the stars were as crucial as the midwife's hands. No noble birth occurred without checking the mother's natal chart to ensure the moment was safe. If the chart looked bad, say Saturn rising linked to melancholy, midwives might delay labor with herbs like valerian or poppy to wait for Jupiter's warmer hour. Astrologer physicians, trained in astronomy and medicine, advised on timing, not delivery, aiming for a legacy-defining birth. A Venus in Pisces baby might be artistic. A Mars-Mercury conjunction could yield a warrior or tyrant. Some feared dark charts enough to ensure certain babies didn't survive, a grim historical whisper. Midwives, often unofficial astrologers, tracked moon phases and zodiac signs, whispering blessings to invoke Venus for daughters or Mars for sons. The baby's delivery direction mattered too. Upward under a Leo moon signaled a leader, downward under Capricorn, a laborer. Breech births during eclipses suggested divine punishment. A 15th-century Italian manual predicted professions by planetary rulers. Mars for soldiers, Saturn for monks, Mercury for scribes or astrologers. Some midwives practiced planet naming, whispering planetary names to newborns to override bad stars, despite church condemnation. The church insisted God shaped souls, but couldn't fully suppress astrology's promise of healthier births. Historians debate whether astrological birth timing was elite or widespread, as oral traditions left few records. For monarchs, fertility was national security. Royal astrologers scheduled conceptions to secure strong, virtuous heirs. A bad chart could cost an astrologer their job, or worse, accusations of sabotaging the crown. King Henry II's astrologers reportedly warned against conception during a Mars-Mercury opposition, fearing a rebellious child. They got Henry the young king, who revolted. In Byzantium, imperial astrologers chose Jupiter-ascendant moments for royal potential. Queen Isabella of Castile's astrologers picked a Venus-Jupiter window for her fourth child, Catherine of Aragon, whose marriage later sparked the English Reformation. A Florentine text claimed a noble family conceived only when Mars was combust, believing it produced flame-born heirs, some of whom became pyromaniacs. Astrologers compared parents' natal charts for harmony, postponing conception if Venus and Mars clashed. Failure to conceive invited whispers of curses or divine disapproval. Some prioritized the sun's sign, others the moon, and some argued conception mattered more than birth as the moment of ensoulment. Exact conception timing was guessed, often via omens or pulse changes. Yet astrologers claimed success when a king showed bravery or eloquence. Scholars debate whether royal horoscopes were genuine beliefs or political tools to justify outcomes. Saturn was the ultimate fertility buzzkill, cold, dry, and sterile, opposing the warm, moist vitality of Venus and Jupiter. In the fifth house, it signaled delayed conception, miscarriage, or infertility, with retrograde Saturn linked to impotence or conceiving without fruit. A woman struggling to conceive might hear her astrologer blame Saturn squaring Mars, turning her womb into a battlefield. Remedies included waiting for Saturn's weaker moments, like in Cancer or Leo, or timing conception during Venus's hour. Ritual baths with fennel and rose petals, charms of wormwood or mandrake, or even tying a dried bat to the thigh under a waning moon were prescribed to counter Saturn's chill. Some families valued Saturnine children for monasteries, like a Saxon girl sent to a convent for her Saturn-blessed seriousness, later known for gloomy manuscripts. In mystic circles, Saturn tested life, its children born late or sickly, but potentially indestructible if they survived. Saturn's mythic role as Kronos, the child devourer, fueled fears of karmic debts or sabotage potential. Renaissance scholars later argued Saturn was selective, not cruel, but in medieval times, its name alone chilled rooms. Historians debate whether Saturn's reputation shaped diagnoses or merely explained unknown infertility causes, much like we blame stress today. Tonight, under your own sky, imagine a world where every bodily rhythm was a cosmic message. Scorpio's claws, the moon's gaze, and Saturn's cold shadow weren't just metaphors. They were fate, dictating love, loss, and legacy in every medieval bedroom. In the dim, pre-dawn light, the sky glows a deep indigo, secretive and forbidden. In a cramped medieval kitchen, a woman stirs a battered iron pot, the sharp, earthy scent of fennel, thyme, and something bitter filling the air. She's not cooking soup. She's brewing an aphrodisiac timed to Jupiter's hour. In medieval Europe, conceiving a child required more than desire. It demanded cosmic timing, intention, and sometimes a potion tasting like a forest floor. Welcome to the peculiar world of planetary aphrodisiacs, where astrology met chemistry in an awkward bid to harness the stars. Each planet ruled specific herbs, stones, and animal parts, and consuming them at the right hour could supposedly bend celestial energies to your will. For fertility, Jupiter, warm, expansive, generous, was key. Its herbs like sage, mint, hyssop, and sweet marjoram were steeped in wine or goat's milk, stirred clockwise, with a whispered prayer like grant increase and joy. A 15th-century French manual suggested rubbing sage-infused oil on the lower back and thighs during Jupiter's hour to open the gates of the seed. Venus, the queen of sensuality, ruled floral herbs like rose, violet, yarrow, and honey. For fading passion, Venusian love potions mixed rose petals, red wine, and cinnamon, or less romantically, a garlic clove soaked in rose water, swallowed whole to heat the blood. Mars, with its spicy ginger, mustard, and nettle, fueled vigor but risked aggressive acts or disobedient children if overdominant. Planetary hours were critical. Each day belonged to a planet. Friday for Venus, Tuesday for Mars, with hours cycling through planetary influences. A fertility potion had to be brewed and consumed in a harmonious hour. Venus for pleasure, Jupiter for conception, the moon for nurturing. Mistiming risked unfavorable influence. Medieval code for a quirky child. A 14th-century English recipe book included a mix for warming cold men. Mint, saffron, goat's fat, and powdered emerald in wine, drunk under a waxing moon while lying naked on time. It warned to wait an hour before intimacy, lest the seed fail. These rituals weren't practical, but offered hope in a world where childbirth was a gamble. They were embodied prayers, giving agency when science offered only guesswork. In rural Germany and Bohemia, sleeping with lapis lazuli under your pillow, ruled by Venus, could spark dreams of conception nights. Stars in the dream were good omens, black stars signaled delay. Darker warnings cautioned that botched planetary rituals could turn affection to loathing or cause monstrous births, reflecting fears of anomalies as omens of corruption. Historians debate whether these recipes were widespread or elite, passed orally among midwives, or confined to those who could afford saffron and emeralds. Likely both. Court astrologers advised nobles, while village women steeped herbs, hoping the stars listened. July was a cursed month for conception, a black hole in fertility calendars. Medieval humoral theory tied the body's balance to blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, disrupted by summer's heat and dryness. The womb, they believed, became parched, inhospitable to life. The sun in Cancer, watery but overpowered by heat, or Leo, hot, barren, fire-aligned, made July risky. Leo conceptions were thought to produce arrogant, tyrannical children. A 1325 guide warned, "Beware the month of July. The seed shall dry, the womb shall resist, and the child, if made, shall be ever quarrelsome." November, Scorpio's cold, and February, Aquarius's instability, were also suspect, but July was the universal red flag. Nobles avoided intimacy, some women retreating to separate quarters. Pregnancies in July prompted extra rituals, clay charms buried under thresholds, rose water, or mint compresses to cool the womb. Summer conceptions were believed to produce hot-tempered, lustful children. Winter ones, cold thinkers. A waning moon in July, dubbed the famine of the stars, was the worst time to conceive. Midwives urged waiting for August's first quarter moon. Peasants, lacking astrologers, often ignored these rules, but elites lived by them, timing as morality. The Tequinum Sanitatis, a 14th-century health handbook, recommended spring for conception and warned against July, listing it alongside onion planting. In some Italian towns, couples doused beds with spring water to counter Leo's fire, likely ruining the mood and mattress. Scholars debate whether these taboos were symbolic or tied to ancient humoral theories, but they shaped lives, teaching when to live and love. When illness struck, a medieval physician arrived, not with potions, but an astrolabe and star charts. In universities like Salerno or Paris, astrology was core to medicine, the body a microcosm of the cosmos. Zodiac signs ruled organs. Aries the head, Scorpio the reproductive organs, guiding treatments. For infertility, physicians checked natal charts for lunar placements or Saturn's influence, prescribing Mercury's fennel or the moon's mugwort. A couple struggling to conceive might learn their moons were in opposition or Saturn loomed in the 5th house, prompting ritual abstinence or sex during lunar hours. A 13th-century manual advised men with Mars and Aries to abstain for 3 days to avoid rash, violent suns. Astrology was both medicine and malpractice insurance. Blaming stars was easier than admitting ignorance. King Charles V's physician-astrologer, Thomas Damasus, delayed a royal conception due to a lunar eclipse. Some physicians even charted a patient's first breath, believing it sealed celestial influences. A Mercury-Saturn square at first breath might curse lungs or fertility. Debates raged over whether astrology described or dictated fate, with church unease growing over predictions that bordered on blasphemy. Yet, poetic diagnoses like "the stars favor thee but delay thy joy" comforted patients, offering hope when medicine faltered. In a quiet alley, a woman ties a leather pouch to her waist, filled with herbs, red jasper, and symbols blessed under a waxing moon. It's not jewelry. It's talismanic birth control, a blend of planetary magic and reproductive agency. Saturn, the planet of restriction, ruled contraceptive charms. Rue, peppercorns, or bronze medallions with planetary seals. A 15th-century Italian grimoire detailed a beeswax talisman with saffron and a burial shroud pin, buried under a fig tree. In northern France, hollowed eggs filled with ash and rosemary sat on windowsills to confuse the moon. These coexisted with Christian prayers, blending Mary and Venus. Midwives and wise women, not witches, crafted these, passing oral knowledge of herbs like wild carrot to prevent pregnancy. Fertility talismans used Jupiter's or Venus's warming herbs, like apple blossoms tied with blue silk, anointed with urine. In 1423, a Strasbourg midwife faced sorcery charges for a wool fur and lead charm that worked until the husband tossed it, followed by twins. A lost alchemical codex described a silver mirror of barrenness, where gazing under a waning crescent halted conception. Historians debate whether talismans were superstition, psychological tools, or proto-pharmaceuticals with contraceptive herbs. They gave women control, whispering "not now" to the stars. Venus's soft glow was a divine signal for conception, her 5-pointed star, the pentagram, tracing a near-perfect pattern every 8 years, called the Rose of Veneris. Medieval astrologers saw it as sacred geometry, symbolizing balance, elements, or a woman's reproductive stages. Women wore pentagram pendants or traced them with rose oil on their bellies under Venus's light to boost fertility. In Pisces, Venus promised beautiful daughters or gentle sons. In Aries, vanity or hot-headedness. In retrograde, emotional chaos. The pentagram adorned fertility texts, a symbol of cosmic harmony guiding the womb's mysteries. Venus played a pivotal role in medieval midwifery, birth timing, and postpartum recovery. Associated with copper, sweetness, and softness, Venus was believed to promote healing. After childbirth, some women wore copper bracelets etched with pentagrams to speed uterine recovery and protect against womb wandering, a mythical condition where the uterus supposedly roamed the body. A 14th-century English parish record tells of a woman who, after 3 miscarriages, followed a mystic's advice to perform a Venus invocation under a new moon, drawing a pentagram in ash on her bed frame and planting wild rose by her threshold. 9 months later, she birthed a healthy daughter named Stella, sparking a regional trend of starborn names for girls. A curious manuscript fragment from a northern French monastery describes a Venus mirror ritual. On a Venus-ruled night, a woman would gaze into a bowl of water reflecting the planet's light until a shape, a flower, flame, or face, appeared as a conception omen. One woman saw a fish and later bore twins with webbed toes, fueling a local superstition against eating fish on Venus nights. The Church, wary of pagan-named celestial bodies, viewed Venus with suspicion, especially for its ties to love and pleasure. By the late medieval period, drawing pentagrams risked sorcery accusations, shifting the symbol from sacred geometry to occult stigma. Yet, Venus's 8-year pentagram cycle, the Rose of Veneris, remained a metaphor for patience, with midwives saying, "Good things take 5 points." Women tracked Venus's movements in journals, noting peak fertility and passion. Historians debate whether the pentagram was symbolic or a genuine fertility guide, but its presence in manuscripts, architecture, and embroidery suggests deep reverence. In a smoky hall, a pregnant woman clutches her belly, unnerved by a flickering star or crooked moon. The midwife slips Rue under the bed, sensing cosmic unease. Medieval belief held the body as a cosmic mirror, vulnerable to celestial and demonic forces. Miscarriages, stillbirths, or deformities weren't blamed on biology, but on malefic planets like Saturn or Mars, especially during a full moon in Scorpio or a Mars-Saturn conjunction. These alignments were thought to open gates to spiritual corruption, allowing demons to ride the seed at conception, leading to defects or a twisted soul. Signs of such corruption included shrill cries or a refusal to nurse, prompting claims like, "He came through me, but not from me." Scorpio and Capricorn were feared, the latter linked to bent limbs, while Aquarius during eclipses was tied to strange speech or seizures. A 13th-century document cataloged monstrous births, a 3-armed child under a Mars-Saturn opposition, a blind infant during a lunar eclipse, or a furry-backed girl when Venus was darkened by Mars. These weren't medical mysteries, but celestial punishments. Women were advised to avoid impure thoughts during Venus retrograde, sleep with protective herbs, and shun mirrors as demonic portals. Guido Bonatti, a 13th-century astrologer, warned that improper alignments invited astral sin, corrupting the womb. In 1382, a Prague midwife refused to assist a birth conceived during an eclipse, fearing a demon's tail in the sky. The child died at 3 months, and the family was shunned. Some monks kept celestial warning tables, marking unclean days like eclipses or martyrs' feast days to avoid conception. Historians debate whether these beliefs were scapegoats for grief or earnest attempts to order chaos, often blaming women's charts or timing. Astrologers offered gender prediction and influence, claiming masculine planets, Sun, Mars, Jupiter, favored boys, while Venus and the Moon leaned toward girls. Mercury, a wild card, tipped based on its aspects. By studying parents' natal charts, moon placement, ascendant, 5th house, astrologers predicted gender and planned conception during masculine hours. Jupiter's on Tuesday, Mars on Sunday, for boys, even advising directional positioning, north/east for males, south/west for females. Humoral theories suggested hot, dry conditions for boys, prompting spicy diets or rosemary baths, while cold, wet conditions favored girls. Charms like eagles' blood-soaked linen or chanting Yoha Emazataris under a waxing moon aimed for specific genders. A 13th-century English noblewoman followed her astrologer's advice, lying on her right side during Jupiter's hour with rosemary burning, and bore a son, cementing the method's reputation. Some believe stars influence temperament or sexuality. Venus-heavy boys might be too soft, Mars-ruled girls overly bold. A 15th-century Spanish astrologer claimed planetary transits could shift gender in the womb, with Venus's rise turning a boy to the female way. Theologians debated whether this defied God's will, but many saw stars as divine design. Historians question whether these practices were sincere or post hoc explanations, offering psychological structure in an uncertain world. Celestial contraception, or abstinence by moonlight, relied on lunar phases. Full moons, waxing crescents, and fertile signs like Cancer or Taurus were high risk. Waning moons or barren signs like Gemini or Aquarius were safer. Saturn or Mercury hours on Wednesdays or Saturdays suppressed fertility, with Mercury believed to scatter the seed. Couples timed intimacy to avoid fertile windows, facing east for favor, west for less risk. The Picatrix, an 11th-century Arabic text, detailed hours and talismans. Lead, nightshade, menstrual blood to limit conception. Women tracked cycles on wooden discs or church calendars, with midwives advising avoidance of the full moon's 3-day window. Omens like ravens or doves signaled fertility or safety. Prayers to saints like Agnes or Cecilia, or red threads tied during dark moons, closed the womb's eye. Some believed Mercury retrograde prevented birth by losing the soul en route, a risky contraception strategy. Historians debate whether these methods were symbolic or strategic, but they offered hope and agency. A somber astrologer, clutching a brass sphere, might frown at a conception date. Mars retrograde, Mercury in the 8th house, Venus eclipsed, muttering, a child of regret. Retrogrades signaled cosmic misalignment. Mars retrograde bred inward anger. Mercury retrograde dulled speech, and Venus retrograde produced overly sensual or heartbroken children. The 8th house, tied to death and secrets, warned of liars or the unlucky, with traits like rotting teeth or dreams that cause waking tears. In 1374, John of Ashendon urged a 40-day abstinence during a retrograde, warning of false light, birthing children with wandering eyes or mismatched limbs. Some believed triple retrogrades, Mercury, Mars, Saturn, birthed children with past life memories. Midwives tried to undo retrograde effects with moon-blessed water or backward blessings, though evidence of success was slim. Jupiter retrograde promised introspective wisdom, Saturn retrograde deep insight, if the child survived. Historians debate whether retrogrades explained bad luck or enforced moral warnings against lust, but they shaped marriages and inheritances, sometimes deeming retrograde children unfit to rule. In a quiet chamber, two people study a moon chart, not to conceive but to avoid it. With no modern contraception, they relied on celestial timing, blending desperation, magic, and a plea for control. The stars didn't just guide love. They dictated its risks, offering a fragile map for navigating life's uncertainties. Inside a stone church, incense swirls as robed figures chant in Latin, their voices thick with reverence. Beyond the altar, a pregnant woman kneels, eyes closed, praying for a safe birth and forgiveness. Last night, she consulted the stars, a potential sin in the church's eyes. This tension defined medieval life. Astrology offered hope and control, but skirted heresy by claiming to shape destiny. The church gave it a wary side-eye. Some popes condemned it. Others secretly employed astrologers. Theologically, suggesting stars governed fate challenged free will and God's sovereignty. If Venus retrograde made you lustful or Saturn blocked fertility, there was room for sin, or salvation. Yet astrology, cloaked as medicine, slipped through as a suggestion rather than control, a loophole allowing its use for labor pains or conception timing. St. Augustine criticized astrology for enslaving the soul to fate, noting twins with identical charts but different lives. Thomas Aquinas, however, saw celestial influence as part of God's design, like the moon's pull-on tides, though he cautioned against over-reliance. Predicting futures or summoning spirits risked blasphemy, but checking Jupiter's position for labor was just prudent. Trials occurred. An astrologer jailed in 1357 for wrongly predicting twins. Another drowned after forecasting a miscarriage under a blood moon. Women persisted, nobles hiring astrologers for conception dates, peasants etching moon phases on pots, wearing saint medals alongside zodiac talismans. In 14th century Norwich, a bishop banned astrology in monasteries, only for his physician to be caught with an almanac, claiming, "The stars are God's clock. I am but the watchman." A Bohemian legend speaks of midwives practicing angelic astrology, tying constellations to archangels guiding souls into wombs. Scholars debate whether astrology threatened orthodoxy or filled gaps the church couldn't, offering comfort where divine will seemed arbitrary. In a village cottage, a midwife adjusts a leather strap etched with a lunar glyph, timing a birth before dawn. Midwives, blending practical skill with secret star watching, noticed births aligned with moons or breezes. Some studied almanacs, others memorized lunar phases, whispering saints or planets' names during labor. Full moons triggered chaotic moon births, with multiple labors at once. Venus's hour eased deliveries, Jupiter's gave strength, but Mars or Saturn hours prompted delays with herbs or reassurances. Wealthier clients might have labors induced under favorable stars, though midwives veiled their reasons. The church distrusted these women, already suspect for their knowledge of life and death. A 15th century Flanders midwife admitted timing births to avoid Mars's hour, citing infant deaths, and was fined but spared due to community support. A half-burned Austrian manuscript describes a midwife hearing planetary voices, Venus singing, Saturn weeping, erased from records but not executed. Scholars debate whether such practices were widespread or rare, but lunar references across oral traditions suggest a shared, intuitive wisdom. In a noisy tavern, a woman in the corner reads a sex worker's star chart. For marginalized women, astrology was survival, guiding shifts, avoiding conception, or explaining hardship. Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, or Pisces women were deemed sensual, with brothel madams using birth signs for matchmaking. Midwives advised lunar charts or Saturnine amulets to prevent pregnancy. A 14th century Venetian record notes a brothel assigning shifts by planetary hours, a Leo-born woman refusing waning moon work. Almanacs sold to sex workers listed fertile days and warnings like, "Beware lovers with Saturn and Scorpio." Marjorie of the Moon, a London midwife, offered astrological contraception, ignored by officials likely her clients. A German text describes a Venusian ritual to charm wealthy men, warning of Aries moon backfires. The church saw these practices as doubly dangerous in unworthy hands, but they persisted as emotional armor and practical strategy. Scholars debate whether this was performative or grassroots science, giving marginalized women structure and choice. In a convent courtyard, a nun studies a starlit scroll, a secret astrologer despite her vows. Convents were schools and hospitals, where educated nuns copied texts, tended herbs, and tracked lunar cycles. Some assisted births, using lunar charts or Venus-blessed linen. The Liber Luminis from a Belgian nunnery wove planetary references into hymns and recipes, coding astrology as devotion. Hildegard of Bingen linked the moon to bodily rhythms without claiming astrology, reading the sky mystically. A 14th century abbess's letter recounts a dream of a winged child under Mercury and Mars, possibly veiled astrology. The church frowned on nuns' celestial meddling, risking witchcraft accusations, yet coded calendars and embroidered glyphs persisted. Scholars debate whether this was widespread or confined to a few convents, but the surviving hints suggest quiet rebellion. A cunning woman, cloaked and carrying clinking bottles, visits a barren wife, checking the waxing moon for conception. These women blended herbalism and sky watching, advising seed days in Cancer or Scorpio for boys, Libra or Pisces for girls. Herbs like mugwort, Venus, or rue, Saturn, were chosen for planetary ties, gathered under specific moons. Rituals included wine-soaked myrtle cloths or walking backward around the bed during Jupiter's hour. A 14th-century York recipe mixed fennel, rose, and pearl for fertility, taken when Venus smiles. Church authorities distrusted their autonomy, but women sought their hope. Scholars see these practices as theater or oral tradition, blending medicine and magic. A child's piercing cries prompt a star check, Scorpio moon, Mars rising, deemed a cursed sky. Postnatal astrology explained colic or delays through the birth moment's cosmic fingerprint. Mercury-Saturn conjunctions meant slow speech, lunar eclipses melancholy. Midwives recorded exact birth times for preventative charts, warning against fire or Tuesday well water for Mars-ruled children. Strong charts, Leo's sun, Taurus moon, promised luck, weak ones led to emotional distance. A 13th-century Bologna astrologer explained a mute child's chart as vivid dreaming, not defect, and the boy became a painter. Yet, starstruck, children with deformities faced cruelty, like a German infant blamed for Lent time, stargazing. A French midwife's notes on a frail boy with his soul of iron, bones of wax, urged Mars-hour care, extending his life. A cryptic herbal note, eyes on Tuesday, hands in April, hints at symptom timing or planetary care. Scholars debate whether this comforted or constrained, but it gave meaning to chaos. On a festival night, a girl prays to Venus during a gate night, when cosmic alignments promised enchanted children. Venus-Jupiter trines birth charismatic, love-born children. Mars-Moon conjunctions warriors. Cazimi births fiery souls. Feast nights like St. Trudeau's or Candlemas amplified these gate births. Rituals included moonlight baths or red ribbons to catch Mars's fire. A French manuscript lists a Venus hour charm for a silver-tongued girl. Eclipses or Mars-Moon oppositions risked hollow luck or blood nights. A 1391 record notes a solstice-born child with mismatched eyes, another an Italian baby who glowed post-birth under a Jupiter-Venus conjunction. In the Carpathians, couples slept under meteor showers, whispering to unborn souls. Scholars see this as symbolic literacy or desperate myth, giving cosmic meaning to life's chaos. In the end, medieval women, nobles, peasants, nuns, midwives, sex workers, turned to stars for hope, weaving prayers with lunar charts. They weren't defying fate, but surviving it, finding patterns in a brutal world. We still check horoscopes, not for control, but for stories, maps to navigate uncertainty, echoing the midwives who listen to the sky's ancient hum.